Hi, it's Katrina. If you're a fan of history, mysteries, and discoveries, you're in the right place. Today I'm talking about lost places whispered about by conquerors, tribes, and kings, all searching for something just out of reach. From the shimmering mirage of El Dorado to the round table of Camelot and the real Fountain of Youth, there is smoke everywhere. But is there any fire? I'm going to sift through the ashes of history to see if we can uncover any real evidence for these legendary locations. So grab your metaphorical shovels and your hard hat because we're about to dig deep into the world of mythical places that could be real. The Sanctuary of Apollo. Archaeologists in Greece have discovered an ancient temple that hasn't been used in 2,400 years. It was found on Despotiko Island, a little-known place with gorgeous beaches. Nobody lives there now, but you can take day trips there if you want to add it to your bucket list. I do. People used to live there until the 17th century, but then the pirates arrived. They killed everyone there and made this island their home base to attack. The temple found there was for worshipping Apollo, the Greek and Roman god of healing, prophecy, and music. When ancient worshippers walked into this ancient temple, they did so under the scrutinous gaze of Apollo, his statue looming large above the entranceway. There was one giant statue and a bunch of smaller ones. Archaeologists have found bits and pieces of them amidst the rubble. A head here, a hand there. You get the picture. The most impressive statues were made from solid marble about 2,480 years ago. Apollo was one of the most influential of the Greek gods and had temples all across the Mediterranean. Take, for example, the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, where the great oracle foretold prophecies and advised kings. The Oracle of Delphi was even featured in the movie 300. The oracle was extremely important during ancient times and could influence kings and even start wars. Although the newly found temple on the island is definitely spectacular, nothing compares to the real-life myth of Delphi's temple, overlooking the beautiful rolling green hills of Greece. To the Greeks, Delphi was the center of the universe. There is even a stone at the site that supposedly marks the middle of the world, called the Omphalos. Here's a picture of it so you know what I'm talking about. Delphi was so important to the Greeks that they established the cult of Apollo there in the 4th century BC. Remember, Apollo was the god of many things that we like. He was the god of the sun, art, healing, archery, light, and prophecy. He was also patron of the arts and god of musicians. Delphi was so important that we would be here all day if I listed all of its mysteries and all of its appearances in ancient history. Delphi's history is so rich that myth and reality can blend together sometimes. According to legend, the Temple of Apollo was made by Apollo himself. He laid the foundations and then went down to a nearby stream and slayed a dragon. That's probably not exactly what happened, but then again, nobody knows who really built the temple. Maybe it was a dragon-slaying god. Camelot and the Knights of King Arthur. A retired professor has found what he believes to be the true location of Camelot. Finally, King Arthur, Sir Lancelot, Gawain, Merlin, and all the other characters from myth are being confirmed as real people. Peter Field is one of the leading experts on Arthurian literature. He claims to know exactly where King Arthur held court with his Knights of the Round Table 1,400 years ago. Peter said it isn't a story, it's real life. Without further ado, here it is, the location of history's most mysterious castle. Camelot stood on the ancient grounds of a Roman fortress called Camelodunum. This was in West Yorkshire, the United Kingdom. Peter said it would have been an ideal spot for a medieval king to establish his seat of power in 500 AD. But just how did Peter figure this out when every other historian missed it? We need proof. According to what Peter told the BBC, the discovery was an accident. Peter was looking through some old maps when suddenly the pieces fell into place. He realized, based on local historical forts, West Yorkshire's geography, and the Arthurian myths, that there is only one fit for Camelot. It must have stood in the modern village of Slack. It was built on the bones of a Roman stronghold after the Romans left England. Peter thinks he has solved one of the greatest historical mysteries ever, but I should mention that despite 1,000 years of research, nobody has ever confirmed if Camelot or King Arthur existed. Peter hasn't either. His hypothesis still needs to be reviewed. More research needs to be done before we can say yes, for sure, this was Camelot. Still, it's possible that he's right. If I were going to believe anybody, it would be Peter Field. He taught at Bangor University from 1964 to 2004. His whole life has consisted of researching King Arthur. Who even was King Arthur really? You might have a vision in your head of a guy with a magic sword that he pulled from a stone, maybe wearing a crown, dressed in chainmail. But historically, who was he? King Arthur was supposedly a ruler of the Celtic-speaking Britons around 500 AD. When the Roman Empire collapsed, Europe fell into chaos. A chaos called the Dark Ages. Scientists have been trying to get rid of the term, but I think it has a certain flavor to it. Anyway, the Dark Ages. The Romans no longer had control of England, and now there was a new invading force coming from the mainland. The Anglo-Saxons flooded England, threatening the status quo. King Arthur was the man standing between the invaders and total annihilation. It was from Camelot that Arthur commanded his warriors. He likely wasn't really a king, and he likely didn't really have a giant round table, but he may have been a real Celtic leader who fought against the Anglo-Saxons. This isn't the first time someone has tried to prove that Camelot was real. In previous decades, Caerleon in South Wales was announced as the location of Camelot. Then it was Cadbury Castle in England. But like I already said, there has never been enough proof to confirm that any one place was definitely Camelot. Which one do you think it is? Let me know in the comments. The Land of Manu. The concept of the Land of Manu surfaces in aspects of Egyptian mythology, hinting at its symbolic significance. But what is the Land of Manu? To the ancient Egyptians, it was where Ra, god of the sun, went every night when he disappeared from the sky. But was it a real land or just make-believe? Manu could be symbolic. It's possible it represents a symbolic realm associated with the afterlife or the underworld. Egyptian mythology is hugely complex and infinitely deep. Manu appears in another myth as a mountain. According to the Egyptians, the sky itself was held aloft by two massive mountains. The mountain in the east was called Baku. The mountain in the west was Manu, the same name as the place where Ra was said to rest every night. At the ends of the Great Mountains were two guardian lions known as Akher. They supposedly protected the sun each day as it rose into the sky. But wait, there's more. Throughout Egyptian myth, Manu continuously appears as a vague but obviously important place. Hathor, goddess of beauty, music, maternity, and the necropolis, was said to only ever emerge from beyond the western mountain of Manu. This place could have been two peaks in any mountain range. It's possible that these mountains from myth are the ones that rose on either side of the Nile Valley. The mountainous wasteland outside of civilized areas of Egypt were usually used to bury people, and so mountains became related to the tombs and the afterlife. The lost city of Zerzura. Zerzura is a mythical lost city that could be hiding underneath the desert sands of the Sahara right now. It's the desert version of Atlantis, said to have been a bustling oasis city overflowing with treasure. It was also guarded by several legions of giants. It's easy to dismiss something as folklore the second you hear giants, but hear me out. There is some surprising evidence that points to Zerzura being real. There is a book called Kitab al-Kanuz, written in the 15th century. The ancient manuscript describes Zerzura as a city white as a dove. It stood at the end of a valley where palm trees grew tall and vines ran down the sides of buildings. It was paradise, a paradise sheltered by an impenetrable desert. That's the first mention of the city that historians know about. Somebody wrote down details of it 600 years ago, but nobody mentions Zerzura again until 1835. John Gardner Wilkinson was an English traveler celebrated today as the father of British Egyptology. During one of his expeditions to Egypt in the 1830s, he met a mysterious Arab in the desert. This strange man had lost his camel and was looking for it. When he saw John, the two got to talking. It turned out there was a city nearby built on an oasis and completely surrounded by palm trees. Nobody lived in the city though. It was in ruins and had been for centuries. John desperately wanted to find the hidden oasis, but it eluded him at every turn. He never found Zerzura, if that was indeed the city the Arab had told him about. Even in modern times, explorers have searched for it and failed. Legendary adventurer John Ball dedicated decades of his life to surveying the Sahara in hopes of finding the oasis city. In the end, when he could search no more, he wrote that Zerzura was no more real than the Philosopher's Stone. Does this mean Zerzura is only a myth? Or does it mean the legendary city has been buried by shifting desert sands? Let me know what you think in the comments. The Fountain of Youth. Don't you want to look young forever? You're definitely not alone. It seems like this dream could become a reality. For anybody who happens to be near Florida right now, apparently you are very close to the Fountain of Youth. The magical, rejuvenating waters of eternal youth can be yours in the oldest continuously occupied settlement of European origin in the United States. But there is a shocking story behind this bizarre landmark that you're going to need to know first. Our story starts in Florida in the year 1513. Juan Ponce de León was a Spanish explorer who was on the hunt for something people had already been looking for since the Stone Age. Some even say Alexander the Great conquered the world in search of this mystical thing. Before his death in 323 BC, Alexander sought a magic river that could heal the damage caused by age. Wouldn't that be nice? Ancient Greek poet Homer once called aging loathsome, while Shakespeare called it life's hideous winter. Throughout history, people have fought tooth and nail against aging. Legendary Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the one who was buried with his legions of terracotta soldiers in 210 BC, is believed to have died drinking mercury because he thought it would give him eternal life. In the 12th century, King Prester John was a mysterious figure who supposedly ruled over a distant land where rivers ran yellow with gold, and there was a fountain of youth. In the 16th century, Ponce de León believed he could find those supernatural waters that all before him had failed to discover. His quest took him to Florida, where he arrived on the shores of a Timucua village. I need to stop here for a second and tell you who the Timucua were. Around 2,000 years before the Spanish laid eyes on Florida, the Timucua were there. They lived in tribes, warred with one another, and traded goods. This loose confederation of tribes ruled everywhere from the Florida coast to southwest Georgia. They received the Spanish visitor into their village, but Ponce de León was a little confused. He thought he'd landed on an island, but in reality, he had just landed in North America. What happened next is a little fuzzy. It's said that the local indigenous people told Ponce he could find the Fountain of Youth in a nearby kingdom called Bimini. Ponce thought they were talking about the Bahamas. However, now historians think they were trying to tell him about the Maya to the south in Mexico. There are no records of the Spanish explorer ever dipping his hands into the Fountain of Youth. Nobody has ever laid eyes on the real fountain, assuming it does exist. You can still stop by in St. Augustine to have a drink of water at the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park. The park is said to be on the exact spot where Ponce de León landed on that fateful day in 1513. There's even a natural spring that gushes water that smells sort of like sulfur. The water has yet to reverse the aging process. St. Augustine itself was founded by another Spaniard named Pedro Menéndez de Áviles in 1565. It was the first successful European settlement in the United States, established 55 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. Have you been to the Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 10, but first it's shout-out time! I want to give a big shout-out to Primal Zodiac Hunter for the generous super thanks. Thanks so much for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Real Shangri-La. Shangri-La is a mystical paradise from Buddhist mythology, right? Wrong. Shangri-La is a fictional place dreamed up by novelist James Hilton in the 1930s when he wrote the book Lost Horizon. So then why does the name Shangri-La immediately conjure images of a mystic realm? It's because James took the myth of Shambhala, the legendary Tibetan paradise, and made it his own. He changed the name to Shangri-La, but kept the legend the same. When Lost Horizon was turned into a movie, the name Shangri-La went mainstream in the West. To know Shangri-La, you must know Shambhala. Shambhala is said to be located somewhere in the Himalayas on a high plateau and surrounded on all sides by mountain peaks. It's believed to look a little something like this. What I just showed you is the real-world Shangri-La. This place is legitimately called Shangri-La and is located in China's Yunnan province. But more on that later. In the 16th century, European travelers started exploring the Himalayas. They wandered into the snowy kingdom of Mughal Emperor Akbar, where they started learning about ancient Buddhist myths. One of the myths was of Shambhala, a land of peace and harmony. European travelers thought it was a real location in the mountains, populated by people who lived in isolation. The Europeans thought they could find Shambhala if they just looked hard enough. Where do you start looking for utopia? The Tibetan Buddhists said Shambhala was somewhere in the shadow of a white crystal mountain, with a beautiful blue lake and a towering gold palace. They looked everywhere, but found nothing but snow and lifeless mountains. You can visit the closest thing to Shangri-La right now on this mortal plane of existence. It used to be the medieval Chinese town of Zhangjian, but in 2001, the town renamed itself Shangri-La in an attempt to boost tourism. It might not be Shambhala, but it's still worth the visit. There's the Dukazong ancient town standing for 1,300 years, though be aware a fire in 2014 did damage some of the buildings. There is the Golden Prayer Wheel in Guishan Park and a giant Buddha statue in Guishan Temple. Shangri-La also has quiet rivers, lush green hills, and snowy mountains in the distance to make you feel like you're in a dream. Do you want to go visit now? The Saints' Phantom Island. There is a ghost island in Spain, and someone even took a picture of it. I can't tell you if it's a little spooky or just awesome. You let me know. On a balmy evening in 1957, photographer Manuel Rodriguez was wandering the hillsides of La Palma in the Canary Islands. He gazed out at the Atlantic Ocean and saw something he didn't recognize. There was a silhouette against the setting sun. An island, it looked like. There were two mountain peaks rising high into the clouds. Manuel was stunned. There was no island in the direction he was looking. At least there wasn't supposed to be. What he saw shouldn't have been real. Manuel snapped a photo of the strange island. Before long, it was on the front page of Spanish newspapers across the country. Manuel had captured evidence of a mythical island people had been searching for since the 6th century, a place known as St. Brendan's Phantom Island. More than 1,400 years ago, the mysterious Irish saint set sail in search of a utopia. Brendan believed there was a biblical promised land other than Israel, and you could find it out in the Atlantic. His crew was made up of clerics. On their boat, they voyaged for 7 years, chasing a utopia that always seemed to evade them. But they did find an impossibly big whale. Brendan and his clerics would land on an island only for it to start shaking. They would run away to their boats just in time to see the island sink. After this happened a couple of times, they realized they had found a giant whale with trees growing on its back like a tropical island. The story of the magical whale has most likely been embellished over the centuries. Brendan was real, but his adventures were juiced with bits of fantasy and filled with magical characters. In the 15th century, the Spanish discovered the Canary Islands and colonized them. I say discovered, but there were indigenous people already there. The indigenous people ended up in a bad situation, but that's a tragic tale for another day. The Canary Islands soon became a hub for colonial adventurers. Many of the adventurers saw the exact same thing as Manuel Quintero in 1957. They witnessed an island just off the coast that shimmered in the distance like a mirage. It looked like a possible Atlantis hiding behind a smokescreen of magic. Modern scholars think St. Brendan witnessed the same thing as the European adventurers and Manuel, only it wasn't a magical island they were all seeing. It was most likely an optical illusion. Scientists have never been able to find the physical island all these people have seen. They have never found the island Manuel Quintero photographed in 1957. They think it's a trick of the eye, yet they can't come up with a cause for the illusion. It's the same mirage that everyone sees, and there is no scientific explanation behind it. Jotunheim, the realm of giants. There are 9 realms in Norse mythology. There is Asgard, home of the Aesir gods like Thor, Odin, and Loki, and then there is Midgard, home of mortal men. There's the realm of Alfheim, where the wise and beautiful Nordic elves lived, and Muspelheim was believed to be a place of fire and roaring volcanoes. Helheim was the land of the dead, the Norse version of Hades. Let's not forget Nidavellir, land of the dwarves, Niflheim, realm of ice and fog, and the most mysterious realm, Vanaheim, mentioned in the Nordic sagas so rarely that nobody even knows what the realm contained. It's been suggested it was home of the Vanir gods, including Freyr and Freya. Most important of all was Jotunheim, land of giants. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to learn that Jotunheim is a real place. You can go there right now. I'll tell you how in just a second. In Norse mythology, the frost giants are known as Jotun. Their home world is one of magic and chaos. The giants and the magical monsters of Jotunheim are at the center of almost all major Nordic myths. They were always threatening Midgard and Asgard with their terrible power. Jotunheim is in southern Norway, part of the Scandinavian mountains. The 29 highest peaks in Norway are in Jotunheim. It's a literal land of giants. It's a place where today you'll find hikers and climbers exploring the snowy slopes and cold, high-altitude lakes. You won't find any real giants, and likely no gods either, but it is a real realm that people lived in more than 4,000 years ago. In August of 2006, archaeologists found a leather shoe from 1800 BC in the Jotunheim permafrost. It's still considered the oldest article of clothing ever found in Scandinavia. It was found alongside arrows and tools. In ancient times, Jotunheim must have felt like a real mythical place to the people who lived there. Hawaiki, the realm of the Māori gods. Hawaiki is either a real island, a mythical realm, or a bit of both. The legendary place is said to be the original homeland of New Zealand's Māori people. They left Hawaiki in ancient times and sailed to new lands. Then, over the next few centuries, the Māori slowly forgot the precise location of where they came from. Lucky for you. To track down the real land of Hawaiki, the birthplace of the Māori civilization, we need to dig deep into their colorful mythology. The Māori claim Hawaiki was the place where the supreme being known as Io created the world and its people. If you want to compare it to something biblical, Hawaiki was the Garden of Eden. Io was the Māori's version of God, or Yahweh, or Allah, or if it makes you more comfortable, you can think of Io as the Polynesian Zeus. Io created Hawaiki Island and then made the people, starting with the first woman. Unlike the myths of Abrahamic religions like Christianity and Judaism, Io made women before men. The first woman's name was Hineahuone. Io fashioned her from the soil of Hawaiki. When all the people were made, they left to populate the world. This left the mythical island to be the private home of the gods. One of the gods that lived there was the Māori version of Loki, the trickster god known as Maui throughout Polynesia. Hawaiki is still a large part of the Māori belief system. It appears in their traditional songs and proverbs. It's said that when a person dies, their spirit returns to the island of their ancestors. When their spirit gets to those sacred shores, they either turn into a bird or get dragged down into the underworld. Let's hope most people turn into birds. That's the myth. But what about the real physical location? Many scholars believe Hawaiki is in fact the island of Raiatea, which is part of Tahiti. It's an ancient and spiritual place that could have been the birthplace of the Māori. The Māori arrived in New Zealand from parts unknown around 1250 AD. When they got there, no other humans had ever laid eyes on the island. Just think about how awesome that would have been to be the very first human to step foot in a place like New Zealand. Remember where they filmed Lord of the Rings? You would have seen a pristine ecosystem rich in unspoiled biodiversity. It would have been like stepping back in time to the Cretaceous period. In any case, the Māori reached New Zealand on purpose. They navigated seaworthy canoes as part of a campaign of discovery. They were looking for new lands with the same determination that Spain was trying to find an easier route to India. But where did the Māori start? Some think it was Raiatea. Others have suggested India, Mesopotamia, or even Mexico. Prisoners of the Trojan War. Archaeologists think they found the mythical city of Troy and Hisarlik in Turkey. Not only would this be absolutely incredible if it's true, it could also confirm that the Trojan War was a real event. It may not have transpired just as Homer wrote more than 2,500 years ago. It likely didn't happen as shown in that movie with Brad Pitt either. But the archaeological evidence does suggest a massive city was burned by the Greeks and destroyed. The legend of the Trojan War might have been inspired by real conflicts or events that occurred at Hisarlik or surrounding areas. It's possible that these events could have been slightly embellished over time. Archaeologists also unearthed a lost city that may have been built by prisoners taken during that war. Archaeologist Dr. Elena Korkas completed a systematic investigation of Tanea, revealing unbelievable secrets of the ancient Trojans. It all started in 2017 with the release of some aerial photographs of what looked like ruined houses. These houses turned out to be part of a 3,000-year-old settlement in Corinth, Greece. The legend is that after the Trojan War was over, the victorious Greeks took prisoners back to Greece with them as slaves. They then forced the beaten Trojans to build a new city. That city survived for centuries, well into the Roman era. Archaeologists have found bones, jewelry, burial grounds, coins, riches beyond imagining. Yet there is hardly any mention of Tanea in ancient historical sources. Could these ruins really have been built by enslaved Trojans like the legend says? The discovery of Troy is a major breakthrough in the world of archaeology. While the details of the Trojan War remain uncertain, it highlights a significant period in the region's history. The investigation of Tanea adds another layer to the story, with the possibility of a connection to the Trojan War legend. The Valley of the Nymphs. In ancient Greek myth, Nysa was the birthplace of Dionysus, god of wine and ritual madness. Some believe that Dionysus was an earlier rendition of Jesus Christ, but more of a party animal. Many of Jesus' famous traits are identical to those of the wine god. You might say the Christians stole a lot of aspects of the Greek myth. For example, Jesus and Dionysus are depicted with long, flowing hair. Dionysus wore a crown of thorns centuries before Jesus Christ was crucified. Dionysus even had his own disciples, just like Christ. Nysa was also the place where Persephone was kidnapped by Hades, lord of the underworld, and forced to be his wife for 6 months of the year. This rather rude kidnapping upset Persephone's mother, Demeter. I think most mothers would be upset by their daughter being dragged to the underworld against her will. Demeter happened to be the goddess of harvest and agriculture and the fertility of the earth. Without her, humans could not survive. With her daughter gone, Demeter stopped tending the garden of the world. Winter fell as the plants withered and died. Spring only came when Hades agreed to return Persephone to the land of the living for 6 months out of the year. Nysa was also home to the mythical rain nymphs. Zeus entrusted these beautiful, supernatural women with the care of Dionysus when he was an infant. They were known as the Nysiades or the Hyades and were sort of like nurses to the gods. Now let's take a look at the reality. Nysa may have been a real place. It was said to be a mountainous district of immense beauty, but nobody knows where it truly was. Some have guessed Nysa was a magical valley in Ethiopia or maybe in Thrace. British philologist Sir William Jones suggested Nysa was a mountain in India. What's interesting about Nysa being in India is that there is a real city called Nysa in India. It's in the northwest and was visited by Alexander the Great. When Alexander arrived with his great army of Greeks and Macedonians, representatives from the city begged him not to destroy them. They said it was sacrilege to capture the city because it was where Dionysus had been born. The mysterious city of Biringan. Biringan means place of lost people. Much like the strange island in the Atlantic, this city is a phantom. It's a mystical hidden city deeply rooted in the religious folklore and mythology of the Philippines. The Philippines is filled with stories and legends just like everywhere else, but you rarely ever hear about them. The lost city of Biringan is like their version of Atlantis, only a little spookier. Those who do find this fantastical place never leave. The legend is that when you enter Biringan, your fate is sealed. That's because the city is home to the Encantos. The Encantos are sort of like elves, only mixed with aliens and restless spirits. In Filipino mythology, these creatures can shapeshift and cause great harm to humans. They are very mischievous and often bloodthirsty. The Encantos live in a parallel world that can see everything going on in the human realm, kind of like fairies. They're always eavesdropping on people and know if you're talking smack about them. If you start asking local people in rural parts of the Philippines about Biringan and the Encantos, they might totally ignore you out of fear. The Lost City is supposed to be somewhere on Samar, the third biggest island in the Philippines, but the exact location is unknown. Everyone has a different idea of where the ghost city stands, and nobody really wants to look for it. Locals tend not to venture out into the darkness, lest they find the city by accident and never leave. The Irish Otherworld of Mell. The last one was a bit creepy, so let's lighten things up with an otherworldly paradise from Irish lore. It's called Mell, a land of unending springtime and warm golden sunlight. The trees bear magical fruits. Divine mead fills cups and keeps everyone happily drunk. Does that sound like your kind of paradise? If so, you just have to find the way to get there. Mell isn't the easiest place to locate. It is full of immortal heroes who only entered by dying a glorious death in battle. Mell is the Irish Valhalla, where the souls of Vikings who fell with sword in hand went when they died. Only those who deserved an eternal life of bliss can get through the front gates. It's like trying to get into heaven. But is it real? In the physical realm, absolutely not. Nobody has ever been able to find a place on this planet where people live for all eternity with endless amounts of mead. That being said, the Irish thought it was a real physical place. The ancient Celts who lived in Ireland centuries ago thought Mell was an earthly paradise. They didn't think it was like Valhalla up in the clouds or like the Christian version of heaven. They believed that when they died, their soul traveled through a portal to a distant place on Earth where they lived forever. Thanks for watching! Which of these ancient places do you wish existed the most? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon. Be sure to stick around for an older video that you might have missed.
Amaterasu's Cave. The Iwano-Iwato Shrine is a very real place, despite being straight out of Japanese mythology. It's located inside a larger area called Takachiho, which is somewhat similar in concept to the Japanese version of Mount Olympus. According to legend, it was the Shinto sun goddess Amaterasu who came to this place after her brother played a cruel prank on her. She was so upset by her brother that the goddess hid inside of a cave in Takachiho, thereby depriving the world of sunlight. The other gods and goddesses realized this was not ideal for the world, so they came to this place and gathered together to lure her out of the cave. But Amaterasu was still too upset to leave, and so the world remained in darkness. It wasn't until one of the goddesses performed a dance to make the gods laugh that Amaterasu finally came out to see why everyone was having so much fun. See, the FOMO was real. Once out of the darkness of the cavern, the light was once more shining in the world. This is definitely just a mythical story, but the cave Amaterasu took shelter in is a real place. The Amano-Iwato Shrine was built just outside its entrance, a truly breathtaking piece of ancient Japanese architecture. You can look directly inside the cave to the dank alcove where the goddess had once hidden the sun. The Hill of Ishnach. The Hill of Ishnach was once considered to be the center of Irish mythology. It's located in the barony of Rathcaranth and currently has the status of being a protected monument. The hill consists of megalithic tombs, several burial mounds, the ruins of stone walls, holy wells, and even an ancient road from medieval times. It's also quite close to the geographical center of Ireland, which may explain why it was the sacred core of the island for thousands of years. In Irish mythology, the Hill of Ishnach is supposed to be the burial place for several different Irish gods, including the Dag Damor. He was the king god, ruler and protector of the Irish Celts. The Irish believed he came from a giant race of people called the Tuatha De Danann, probably not saying that right, but they were the most important ruling clan of gods in Ireland. There are plenty of myths about the Dag Damor. He was a warrior, a father figure, fought the forces of evil, and his bones are under the Hill of Ishnach. There are other strange mythological stories surrounding this hill as well. It's said to be a meeting place between the earthly realm and that of the other world. There was supposedly a sacred fire that blazed on its peak for 7 years, and once, long ago, there was a great hailstorm over the hill, which created the 12 great rivers of Ireland. No matter where you look in Irish mythology, the Hill of Ishnach is going to be mentioned somewhere, and this incredible mythological location is one you can actually visit today in the real world. Sodom and Gomorrah. When archaeologists were looking through the ruins of a town from the Bronze Age called Tal el-Hammam, they discovered something unbelievable. The town had been destroyed in the year 1650 BC. At that time, this was one of the 3 biggest cities in the region, even larger than Jerusalem. It had mud brick buildings over 5 stories tall, temples, places of learning. It was a true metropolis. But what archaeologists were stumped about was the fact that it seemed to have been completely melted by fire in a single day. It didn't look like the destruction seen through warfare, but by some kind of cataclysmic event. It's now believed Tal el-Hammam was destroyed by a fireball from the sky. An exploding space rock fell upon the city with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs, likely inspiring the mythical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The city of Sodom and Gomorrah is mentioned in the book of Genesis as a place of great sin. The people in the city were so sinful and hedonistic that God rained upon them brimstone and fire. The Bible literally describes fire and sulfur coming from heaven and destroying the city in a great blazing inferno. And scientists can confirm that this really did happen. According to Christopher R. Moore, archaeologist at the University of South Carolina, it was an airburst from a meteor that destroyed Tal el-Hammam, aka Sodom and Gomorrah. It likely exploded about 2.5 miles above the tops of the buildings, creating a blast force 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The air temperature rose to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. People's clothing burst into flames. Wood was scorched and turned to ash. Swords and pottery melted. Then a shock wave ripped through the city at over 740 miles per hour, reducing every man-made structure to a pile of rubble. The ancient people who learned what happened here were so shocked, the only way they could make sense of the devastation was by attributing it to an angry act of God. The Killing Stone. The Seshoseki is a stone from ancient Japanese mythology. It's also known as the Killing Stone. Legend has it that anyone who touches the stone will die immediately. The reason for the deadly quality of the stone? According to mythology, the boulder supposedly held an evil spirit. The spirit is that of a 9-tailed fox who transformed itself into a beautiful woman named Tamamo no Mei with the intention of killing Emperor Toba. However, the wily fox was no match for the emperor and was defeated. Upon its defeat, the evil fox was put into the stone and dropped on a volcanic mountain. And there the stone has stayed for centuries. It was even registered as a historical site in 1957. But in 2022, something unthinkable happened. Visitors to the popular site were stupefied to see that the Killing Stone had split in half. Yes, the legendary stone containing the spirit of the 9-tailed fox broke apart, releasing the evil spirit back into the world. For those who really believe in Japanese mythology, this was not a good day. There are some who still think the old tales are real. These people are currently under the impression an evil spirit has been released from its prison and is about to start causing serious problems. On the other hand, the cracked stone was probably a natural occurrence caused by cold weather. Rain and freezing temperature caused the stone to crack, not an angry spirit. At least, that's the hope. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Hanging Gardens. Out of all the ancient wonders of the world, there is only one that's never technically been found. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon have reached a mythical status in history because no one, historians, archaeologists, researchers, and scientists alike, can figure out if the place ever really existed. The Hanging Gardens were described as a remarkable feat of engineering, a series of tiered gardens with trees, shrubs, and all the wild plant life you could imagine. The gardens were supposedly constructed alongside a grand palace by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. This was around 2,500 years ago. The biggest issue is that nobody has found archaeological proof of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. There are also no ancient Babylonian texts that so much as mention the gardens. Either this place was mythical, or there was some other garden that was greatly exaggerated by Greek and Roman writers. The third and final option is that the Hanging Gardens were built somewhere else altogether, and not in Babylon. Sherwood Forest. When somebody says Sherwood Forest, the first thing that pops into your head is probably the famous outlaw Robin Hood. But what you may not know is that Sherwood Forest is a very real place in England. The existence of Robin Hood is highly debatable, but there is no arguing Sherwood Forest is a real and very magical place. So who was Robin Hood? The truth is that Robin Hood was a common nickname given to any petty criminal starting around the 13th century. There were probably men just like Robin Hood who lived in the forest, hiding from the king and his court. They were definitely criminals, and the peasants probably did look up to them. But nobody thinks there was one real Robin Hood. Instead, the name first appears in a poem in 1377, then gets blown out of proportion in 1521 by Scottish historian John Mayer. From then on, Robin Hood was the medieval Batman. As for Sherwood Forest, its history goes back to the days of prehistoric hunters. Flint tools have been found belonging to Stone Age people. Farmers cropped up in the Iron Age, and the Romans crept into the forest in the early part of the Common Era. It was once the biggest forest in England, with 100,000 acres in the 1200s. This was during the rumors of Robin Hood, when real thieves lived in the woods and attacked travelers. Sadly, the forest has been picked apart and turned into farmland, and now most of it is gone. Hades. We may not have any proof that the legendary underworld from Greek mythology is a real place, but we do know where there is one supposed entrance. I am, of course, talking about Hades, the place people in the ancient Greek world believed they went when they died. Many people believed Hades was accessible through certain caves and tunnels going into the earth. Because they believed the underworld was literally under their feet, it only made sense that you could journey there by finding the right cave. One of these supposed entrances is at Cape Matapan. It's here where several stories from Greek mythology took place. It's where Orpheus entered the underworld to look for his lost love. It's where Hercules went down into the gloom to find Cerberus, Hades' three-headed dog. Even the Spartans saw how important this place was and built temples and altars all over the rocky headland. There is also a temple here built by the Spartans that still stands, one dedicated to the sea god Poseidon. Today, we know the caves at Cape Matapan don't lead to a terrible underground land of the dead, but they are still there. They've mostly been flooded by now and can only be visited by boat. The Newgrange Tomb. The Newgrange Tomb in Ireland is certainly one of the more mysterious places in the country. The tomb dates back 5,200 years to the Neolithic period. It's also just one part of a much larger historic site called Bruna Bonnier. Together, there are three major tombs spread across the area: Knowth, Dowth, and Newgrange. There is no denying the Newgrange Tomb is a magical place. The rocks are carved in strange Celtic designs with spirals. There are over 97 large stones covered in these designs, used as the building blocks of the megalithic tomb. Archaeologists believe whoever made the designs didn't actually build the structure. The Celts didn't arrive in Ireland for thousands of years after the tomb was completed, so the strange spirals and other artwork probably came later. We don't know exactly what ancient myths the Newgrange Tomb was connected to. We do know that it was built to perfectly line up with the sun during the winter solstice. The sun beams through a box on the roof right above the entrance to the main passage. On the winter solstice, the sun illuminates the main chamber and turns it into a blinding box of pure gold for about 15 minutes. All these thousands of years later, people still travel to the tomb every year just to experience it. The Fountain of Youth. The myth of the Fountain of Youth has been around for a very long time in just about every culture. There are dozens of legends from Japan to Polynesia about a special source of water with either unbelievable healing properties or the ability to make you immortal. But here's a place from myth that really does exist. The story goes back to the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de León. He heard rumors of a magical fountain in a rejuvenating river north of Cuba. This was around the second voyage of Christopher Columbus to the New World in 1493. But it wasn't until after his death that the stories of him and the Fountain of Youth began being told throughout the empire. In 1535, there was a rumor that Ponce de León was seeking the fountain to cure his impotence. There are no historical records that show Ponce de León ever discovering the Fountain of Youth. There aren't even any records of him arriving in St. Augustine, Florida. Most historians think he landed about 60 miles south and missed it altogether. Nonetheless, the St. Augustine Fountain of Youth is a very real place. There is a natural spring here that people still believe magically gives them a youthful appearance. Rumor says that Ponce de Leon was the first European to drink from the spring. It's probably not true, but either way, it's been a source of alleged healing for Europeans and their descendants for 500 years. The Gates of Guinea. If you've ever wondered where the mythical gate to the voodoo underworld is, you're in for a treat. Legend has it that there are 7 gates throughout the New Orleans French Quarter, all leading to the land of the dead, known as Guinea. In voodoo teachings, the souls of the dead reside in this dark underworld. It's not a place of misery and torture, but more like a murky plane of purgatory. Spirits must wade through this purgatory before they are eventually reunited with their ancestors. The voodoo underworld is ruled by Baron Samedi, a skeleton in a top hat. For voodoo practitioners in America, these gates are in New Orleans, scattered at various points along Canal Street in cemeteries. One of them is supposedly hidden within the St. Louis Cemetery, another in the Greenwood Cemetery, one in the Cypress Grove Cemetery, and another in the St. Patrick Cemetery. Have you ever been to New Orleans? Did you see these gates? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite ancient mythological place that actually exists? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you soon for more videos like these. Bye!